The War Council chamber aboard the massive Zephyrian battleship Eternal Valor buzzed with tension. Commander Thexka, a 7-foot-tall reptilian warrior with scales that shifted from deep blue to silver when agitated, stood before a holographic display showing the galaxy's outer rim. His 4 eyes tracked the red markers indicating the Void Swarm's latest advance. Sector 77 Alpha has fallen, reported Sub-Commander Yillis, her mandibles clicking nervously. The entire Calarian defense fleet was consumed in less than 6 standard hours. Thexka's tail lashed behind him. In his 300 years of military service, he had never encountered an enemy like the Void Swarm. They appeared from the dark spaces between stars, creatures of living shadow and hunger that devoured entire civilizations, leaving nothing but empty worlds behind. "What about the Tertian Empire's response?" asked General Vox Prime, a crystalline being whose body pulsed with anxious orange light. "Retreated to their core systems," Yillis replied. "They've abandoned their outer colonies entirely." The assembled alien commanders exchanged worried glances. The Galactic Defense Coalition, formed from 12 major species, had been humanity's idea 50 years ago. Most had joined reluctantly, viewing the young species as aggressive and unpredictable. Now, as their traditional military might crumbled before an unstoppable enemy, they found themselves turning to the very beings they had once dismissed. "Where are the humans positioned now?" Thexka asked, though he already knew the answer would disturb him. "They've established defensive lines at sectors 5 through 9, Yillis said. "Right in the swarm's path. Admiral Chin refuses to retreat despite our recommendations." General Vox Prime's crystalline form flickered. "Madness. Even our combined fleets couldn't hold those positions? What makes these humans think their smaller force can succeed?" Thexka had wondered the same thing. Human military doctrine made no sense to most galactic strategists, where other species relied on superior technology. Overwhelming numbers or defensive formations? Humans seem to thrive on impossible odds in desperate situations. "Sir," interrupted Communications Officer Zil-9, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Admiral Chun." The hologram shifted to display Admiral Sarah Chun, a compact human with graying hair and eyes that held an intensity that made even veteran alien warriors uncomfortable. Her uniform was crisp despite being aboard a ship that had seen continuous combat for the past month. "Coalition Command," Chun began without preamble. "I'm requesting immediate evacuation of all civilian populations from sectors 10 through 15. Thexka leaned forward. "Admiral, those sectors are well behind your defensive line. Surely the swarm won't reach them even if your position fails." Chun's smile was sharp and predatory. "Commander, you're thinking like prey. The swarm isn't just going to push through us. They're going to try to go around us, hit our supply lines, spread terror among the civilian populations." "That's what I would do." "You would abandon your defensive position to attack civilians?" General Vox Prime asked, his tone horrified. "If I was the enemy and wanted to break coalition resolve quickly?" "Absolutely." Chun's matter-of-fact tone sent chills through the assembled aliens. "But since I'm not the enemy, I'm going to stop them from doing exactly that." Thexka studied the human admiral. "What aren't you telling us, Admiral?" "I need you to trust me, Commander. Begin the evacuation immediately. And I need every ship you can spare sent to the Kepler Junction." "The Kepler Junction is empty space," Yillis protested. "There's nothing there but an old mining station." "Exactly." Chion's image flickered as her ship apparently took fire. 24 hours, people. After that, I recommend you stay clear of the outer rim for a while." The transmission cut out, leaving the alien commanders staring at empty space. "She's planning something," Dexka muttered. Meanwhile, aboard the human dreadnought Indomitable, Admiral Chun stood on the bridge watching her crew work with practiced efficiency. Unlike the sleek, sterile bridges of alien vessels, the human ship felt lived-in, functional. Coffee cups sat next to tactical displays, personal photos were taped to workstations, and the air carried the scent of recycled atmosphere and determination. "Ma'am," called Lieutenant Rodriguez from the communications station. The Zephyrians are asking for clarification on our tactical plan. Tell them we're going to show the swarm why you don't threaten human space. June moved to the tactical display where Captain Morrison, her tactical officer, was updating deployment patterns. All ships are in position. Admiral, Morrison reported. But I have to ask, are we really going to? We're going to do what humans do best, Captain. We're going to be absolutely, completely unreasonable. 3 sectors away, the void swarm advanced like a plague of living darkness. Individual creatures ranged from fighter-sized scout forms to massive bioships larger than human dreadnoughts. They moved with perfect coordination, consuming everything in their path and growing stronger with each world they devoured. The swarm mind, a collective consciousness that spanned millions of individual creatures, had calculated this galaxy's resistance potential. The reptilian Zephyrians fought bravely but predictably. The crystalline beings were powerful but brittle under pressure. Most species followed logical military doctrine, but something about the human deployment patterns troubled the swarm mind. Where other species had retreated to defensive positions around their most valuable worlds, the humans had advanced toward the swarm's projected path. Their formations were loose, aggressive, and positioned in ways that invited attack. It was either a trap or incompetence. The swarm mind analyzed the data again. Human military history showed consistent patterns of aggressive tactics, unit cohesion under extreme stress, and an alarming tendency to achieve victory through methods that should have resulted in total defeat. The swarm mind decided to test these humans before committing to a full assault aboard the human destroyer. Relentless. Captain Jake Sullivan watched the sensor readings with grim satisfaction. 3 days earlier, his ship had been conducting what appeared to be routine patrols along the designated defensive line. In reality, they had been laying the groundwork for what Admiral Chun called the most gloriously stupid plan in military history. Contact bearing 27 Mark 4, reported Ensign Park. Looks like about 50 swarm scouts. Perfect, Sullivan grinned. Signal the fleet. Time to ring the dinner bell. The Relentless broke formation and accelerated directly toward the swarm scouts, weapons blazing. To any observer, it looked like a suicide run one small destroyer against 50 enemy contacts. The swarm scouts responded predictably, converging on the lone human ship. But as they closed distance, the space around them erupted in weapons fire. 3 more human destroyers decloaked, having used their superior stealth technology to remain hidden until the perfect moment. The brief engagement lasted less than 10 minutes. When it was over, wreckage from 47 swarm scouts drifted in expanding clouds of debris. The 4 human ships, badly damaged but intact, limped back toward their lines. Textbook, Sullivan reported to Admiral Chun. They took the bait perfectly. The swarm mind processed this engagement with growing unease. The humans had sacrificed the element of surprise for a minor tactical victory, unless ... realization struck like a cold wind. The humans weren't trying to win individual engagements. They were studying the swarm, learning how it responded to different stimuli. Each seemingly reckless attack was actually a carefully controlled experiment. Over the next 72 hours, human forces conducted 17 similar probing attacks. Each time, they appeared to bite off more than they could chew, barely escaping with their ships intact. Each time, the swarm responded with standard tactical doctrine. By the 4th day, the swarm mind had identified clear patterns in human behavior. They favored close-quarters combat, relied heavily on deception and misdirection, and seemed willing to accept catastrophic casualties to achieve tactical objectives. More importantly, their defensive line was precisely where long-range sensors indicated it should be. The humans were predictable, after all. The swarm mind began moving its main force forward. It was time to test humanity's resolve with overwhelming numbers. Admiral Chun received the sensor reports while reviewing evacuation progress from the outer colonies. 3 million civilians had been moved to safety, including populations from worlds that didn't even know they were in danger yet. "Ma'am," Captain Morrison said quietly, "swarm main force is 6 hours out from our forward positions. Estimated strength is..." He paused, checking his readings again. 1,200 major bioships, estimated 15,000 support craft. Chun nodded. Signal all ships. Begin Phase 2. Admiral, Morrison's voice carried a note of concern. The fleet commanders are asking about retreat options. Tell them the same thing I told Coalition Command. After today, the only retreat any of us need to worry about is the swarms. She turned to address the bridge crew. People, in about 6 hours, we're going to be facing odds that would make any sane military force surrender immediately. Fortunately, we're humans, which means sanity is optional and surrender isn't in our vocabulary. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the bridge crew. The swarm thinks they understand us, Chun continued. They think we're brave but ultimately doomed. They think our tactics. The gravitational distortions began as ripples in space-time, barely noticeable except to the most sensitive instruments. Within minutes, they had grown into visible warping effects that bent light itself around the trapped swarm fleet aboard the Zephyrion command ship. Vex-Ka watched in stunned silence as the tactical display struggled to make sense of what was happening in the Kepler system. Ships appeared to be in multiple locations simultaneously. Weapons fire curved in impossible directions. And at the center of it all, the dying red giant star pulsed with energy that no star should possess. Commander, Subcommander Yillis whispered, what are the humans doing to that star? Before Vex-Ka could respond, Admiral Chun's voice crackled over the communications array. Her transmission was distorted by the gravitational effects, but her words were clear enough. Coalition Command. This is Admiral Chun. We've successfully initiated Stellar Manipulation Protocol 77 Alpha. Recommend all non-human vessels maintain minimum safe distance of 5 light hours from the Kepler system. Stellar manipulation? General Vox Brian's crystalline form flashed bright orange. That's impossible. No species has that technology. The humans apparently do, Vex-Ka replied grimly. The question is, what else are they capable of? Inside the gravitational trap, the swarm mind experienced something it had never felt before, genuine confusion bordering on panic. Its perfect coordination was breaking down as space itself became unreliable. Ships that should have been light minutes apart suddenly found themselves occupying the same coordinates. Communication between different parts of the fleet became impossible as gravitational. Lensing scattered their signals across time as well as space. Worse, the energy being channeled from the star was beginning to affect the swarm's biological ships directly. The living tissue that formed their hulls was reacting to the exotic radiation. Growing unstable and unpredictable, the swarm mind tried to order a retreat. But retreat required knowing which direction was away from the trap. In the twisted space around Kepler, such concepts had become meaningless. Aboard the human flagship Indomitable, Admiral Chun monitored the situation with grim satisfaction. The gravitational manipulation system had taken 15 years to design and another 10 to build in absolute secrecy. It represented humanity's answer to a simple question. What do you do when faced with an enemy too numerous and too powerful to defeat through conventional warfare? Status report, she called to Captain Morrison. The containment field is holding steady, Morrison replied, consulting his readings. Swarm forces are showing signs of disorientation and structural damage. However, the energy requirements are enormous. We can maintain this for maybe 6 more hours before the solar collectors overload. Chun nodded. She had known from the beginning that this weapon could only be used once. The star would survive, but barely, and the massive infrastructure they had built in its corona would be completely destroyed in the process. 6 hours is plenty, she said. Signal the fleet. Begin Phase 4. Lieutenant Rodriguez looked up from his station. Ma'am, Phase 4 isn't scheduled to begin for another. Plans change, Chun interrupted. The swarm is adapting faster than we anticipated. Time to show them what human adaptability looks like. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come instead of maintaining their positions outside the gravitational field. Human ships began diving directly into the distorted space around the trapped swarm fleet. To any observer, it looked like mass suicide. No ship could navigate safely in space where the laws of physics had been temporarily suspended, but the humans had spent months training for exactly these conditions. Each ship carried specialized equipment designed to function in gravitational anomalies. Their crews had practiced combat maneuvers in similar distorted environments, created by smaller versions of the same technology. Most importantly, they had learned to think three-dimensionally about warfare in ways that even the most advanced alien species had never considered. The swarm scouts that tried to engage the incoming human ships discovered that conventional tactics were useless when your weapons fire could be bent back toward your own position by gravitational effects. The humans, however, had learned to use these same effects as force multipliers. Captain Sullivan's destroyer Relentless, its hull scarred from the earlier engagement, twisted through space in a pattern that should have torn the ship apart. Instead, it used the gravitational currents like a surfer riding a wave, its weapons targeting swarm ships that were technically behind it but appeared in front due to the bent spacetime. "This is insane," Ensign Park muttered, watching his sensor readings flicker between impossible configurations. "This is human," Sullivan corrected with a fierce grin. "Contact bearing, well, everywhere. All weapons, free fire. Remember, in here, there's no such thing as a miss. Every shot will hit something eventually." The battle inside the gravitational field defied every known principle of space combat. Human ships seemed to appear from multiple directions at once, their weapons fire following curved paths that allowed them to strike targets from impossible angles. The swarm forces, despite their overwhelming numbers, found themselves unable to coordinate an effective response. But the true genius of the human strategy wasn't the technology or the tactics. It was the psychology. The swarm mind had evolved to process and respond to threats that followed predictable patterns. Even the most aggressive species it had encountered still fought according to logical principles. They sought to minimize casualties, protect valuable assets, and achieve clear tactical objectives. Humans, it was becoming clear, operated according to entirely different principles. They were willing to risk everything on strategies that seemed impossible. They viewed desperate situations not as problems to be solved, but as opportunities to be exploited. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to take genuine pleasure in defying conventional wisdom. As the battle raged inside the twisted space around Kepler, the swarm mind made a discovery that shook it to its core. The humans weren't just fighting to defend their territory. They were enjoying themselves. Admiral Chun received constant updates from the ships operating inside the gravitational field. Despite the chaotic conditions, casualties were surprisingly light. The human crews were adapting to the bizarre environment with an ease that impressed even her. "Admiral," Captain Morrison called, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Defense Coalition. They're requesting an explanation." Chun almost smiled. She could imagine the confusion among the alien commanders as they watched the tactical displays showing impossible battles in twisted space. "Put them through." Vexka's voice carried a mixture of awe and concern. "Admiral Chun, our sensors are showing combat actions that violate several fundamental laws of physics. How are your ships operating in that environment?" "Commander, you're thinking about it wrong," Chun replied. "We're not operating despite the environment. We're operating because of it. When you can't rely on the normal rules, you have to make new ones. But the casualties are minimal. Turns out humans are pretty good at impossible situations. It's kind of our specialty." General Voxprime's voice crackled through the interference. "Admiral, this technology you're using, stellar manipulation, gravitational warfare, how long have you possessed these capabilities?" Chun paused before answering. This was the question she had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. "The gravitational manipulation system has been operational for 18 months, she said finally. "The stellar collection arrays have been in place for 5 years. We finished the last components about 6 months before the swarm first appeared in our galaxy." The silence that followed was deafening. You built this before you knew about the swarm? Dexka's voice was barely a whisper. We built it because we knew something like the swarm would eventually come, Chun corrected. When humanity first encountered the galactic community 50 years ago, we noticed something troubling. Every major species had stories about ancient enemies, vanished civilizations, unexplained disappearances, but nobody seemed to be preparing for the possibility that these things might return. She paused, watching the battle reports scroll across her screens. Humans have a saying, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. We joined the coalition because we hoped for peace and cooperation, but we never stopped preparing for war with something that could threaten the entire galaxy. Yillis's mandibles clicked nervously. How many other weapon systems like this do you have? Enough, Shun replied simply. Inside the gravitational field, the tide of battle was turning decisively. The swarm forces, unable to adapt to the impossible conditions, were being systematically destroyed by human ships that moved through the twisted space like they belonged there. But the swarm mind was learning. Even as its forces were decimated, it was studying human tactics, analyzing their responses, searching for weaknesses. It found one. Despite their technological superiority and tactical brilliance, the humans were still biological beings. They could be hurt, killed, exhausted, and they clearly cared about their individual ships and crews in ways that the collective swarm did not. The swarm mind made a decision that would have been unthinkable for any individual organism. It began day. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler, the galaxy had settled into an uneasy peace. The swarm's survivors had vanished into the void between galaxies, leaving behind only empty worlds and the lingering fear of their return. But across coalition space, something fundamental had changed. Humanity was no longer the aggressive, newcomer species to be tolerated and occasionally utilized. They had become something far more significant and far more unsettling. The galaxy's acknowledged apex predators. Commander Dexka stood in the observation deck of the new Coalition Strategic Command Facility, watching human construction crews work on the latest addition to their defenses. The structure they were building defied conventional engineering, a massive ring surrounding an entire star, designed to harness and focus stellar energy for purposes that most alien engineers couldn't even comprehend. It's called a Dyson ring, explained Admiral Chun, joining him at the observation window. Not quite a full Dyson sphere, but enough to power our new defensive systems. How many of these are you building? Dexka asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Classified, Chun replied with a slight smile. Let's just say that any future threat to the galaxy will find us much better prepared. The truth was more complex than either of them acknowledged. In the months since Kepler, humanity had undergone what historians would later call the Great Acceleration. Projects that had been theoretical or in early development were suddenly given unlimited resources and priority status. The gravitational manipulation technology that had been humanity's secret weapon was now being mass-produced and deployed across their territory, but more than the technology, it was humanity's psychology that had evolved. The swarm had forced them to confront a simple reality. In a galaxy full of species that thought defensively, humanity had become the only force capable of thinking offensively on a scale large enough to matter. Admiral, Dexka said carefully, there are concerns within the coalition about humanity's rapid military expansion. Chun turned to face him directly. What kind of concerns? The Tertian Empire has withdrawn from 3 joint defense initiatives. The Calarians are requesting buffer zones between human and Calarian space. There are whispers about humanity becoming the next galactic threat. Chun was quiet for a long moment, watching the construction crews manipulate materials with precision that bordered on artistry. Tell me, Commander, what do you think makes a predator dangerous? Teeth, claws, natural weapons? No. Chun shook her head. What makes a predator truly dangerous is intelligence combined with the willingness to use it. Most species in this galaxy have one or the other, but not both. You have the intelligence, but you're too civilized to fully weaponize it. Other species have the aggression but lack the sophistication to make it truly effective. She gestured toward the construction project outside. Humans have both. We're intelligent enough to build weapons that can kill stars and aggressive enough to actually use them if necessary. That's not a threat to the galaxy, it's the galaxy's insurance policy. Before the XK could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Emergency lights bathed the observation deck in red as automated voices announced a priority alert. Admiral Chun to Strategic Command immediately. Code Alpha priority. Chun and Nexka rushed to the command center, where they found General Vox Prime's crystalline form pulsing with urgent orange light as he studied incoming sensor data. Report. Chun ordered. Long-range sensors are detecting massive gravimetric disturbances in the Andromeda approach vector. Vox Prime announced. Pattern analysis suggests. He paused, his form flickering between orange and deep red. It suggests the swarm has returned? In significantly greater numbers. The tactical display that materialized showed a sight that sent chills through every being in the room. The scattered red dots representing swarm forces stretched across several light-years of space. Preliminary analysis suggested a fleet at least 10 times larger than the force they had defeated at Kepler. They've been breeding, Chain observed with clinical detachment, and learning. How long until they reach Coalition space? Xka asked. Current trajectory and speed suggest 18 standard months, reported the Calarian sensor technician manning the display. Time enough, Chun murmured, then raised her voice. General Vox Prime, initiate Protocol 7, Commander Xka. I need you to contact all Coalition members immediately. Tell them we're implementing the Humanity Doctrine. The what? Xka had never heard that term before. Chun's smile was sharp and predatory. Something we've been working on since Kepler. The Coalition is about to learn what happens when humans have 18 months to prepare for a fight. Across the galaxy, the response to news of the swarm's return varied dramatically between species. The Tertian Empire immediately began fortifying their core worlds and preparing for a siege that might last centuries. The Calarians started evacuating their outer colonies and consolidating their forces around strategic industrial centers. The crystalline beings began developing new defensive technologies based on their understanding of energy manipulation. All of these were rational, logical responses based on sound military doctrine. Humanity's response was characteristically different. Instead of fortifying or retreating, human forces began expanding outward at an unprecedented rate. Construction fleets spread across the galaxy like a plague of builders, establishing what appeared to be mining operations and research stations in systems that had no strategic value. To most alien observers, it looked like humanity had lost its collective mind. Admiral Chun stood in her new command center aboard the orbital platform Prometheus Station, watching reports flow in from across human space. The scale of the operation was staggering even by human standards. They were essentially rebuilding the galaxy's infrastructure in less than 2 years. Status report. She called to her staff. Project Lighthouse is 60% complete, reported Colonel Hayes, her chief of staff. We should have full coverage of all major shipping lanes within 8 months. Project Hercules. On schedule. The first installations should be operational in 14 months. And Project Pandora? Hayes paused. Ahead of schedule, but the Coalition partners are getting nervous about the power requirements. Chun nodded. Project Pandora was the one initiative she hadn't fully explained to her alien colleagues. They wouldn't understand it until they saw it in action. What about personnel? That's where things get interesting, Hayes admitted. Recruitment is up 400% across all human worlds. We're not just getting military volunteers, scientists, engineers, even civilians are signing up for combat duty. Chun wasn't surprised. Word about the swarm's return had spread through human space like wildfire, and the response had been typically human, not fear or despair, but angry determination. They want another fight, she observed. They want to finish the job, Hayes corrected. There's a difference. Meanwhile, in the deep space between galaxies, the swarm mind was making its own preparations. The defeat at Kepler had taught it valuable lessons about human capabilities and psychology. This time, it would not underestimate its enemy. The new swarm fleet was larger, more diverse, and significantly more intelligent than its predecessor. The swarm mind had incorporated genetic material and tactical knowledge from dozens of conquered species, creating specialized forms designed specifically to counter human strategies, bioships, immune to gravitational manipulation, communication networks that couldn't be disrupted by electromagnetic interference. Most importantly, individual creatures capable of independent thought and action, making the fleet less vulnerable to coordination failures. But the swarm mind had also learned something more subtle about humanity. They were dangerous not just because of their technology or their tactics, but because of their fundamental psychology. They treated warfare not as a necessary evil but as a creative endeavor. This time, the swarm would be ready for human creativity. As the months passed, reports began reaching Coalition Command about strange human activities in remote systems. Surveys indicated they were building massive installations that served no apparent purpose. Energy readings suggested power generation on scales that dwarfed entire civilizations. Most disturbing of all, there were reports of human ships engaging in what appeared to be live-fire exercises against targets that didn't exist. Admiral Chun, Vexka said during one of their regular briefings, "My government is requesting clarification on human military activities in Sector 15. Our long-range sensors are detecting energy signatures that suggest you're testing weapons capable of destroying entire star systems." "Not destroying," Chun corrected. "Relocating, I'm sorry? We're not building weapons to destroy star systems, Commander. We're building weapons to move them." The silence that followed was so complete that the background hum of the station's life support systems became clearly audible. "Why," Vexka asked slowly, "would you need to move star systems?" "Because static defenses are predictable," Chun explained. "The swarm expects us to fortify our current positions and wait for them to attack. Instead, we're going to bring the fight to them in ways they can't possibly anticipate." General Voxprime's crystalline form flickered rapidly between colors. "Admiral, the energy requirements for stellar manipulatio."